Colin O'Keefe here for LXPN TV. The unveiling of AT&T's sponsored data feature is drawing a lot of criticism. But is it as bad as everyone thinks it is? And if it is, will we see the FCC step in to stop it? Joining me now to discuss both of those questions is attorney Dana Fricks. He is with Chadbourne and Park, and he is an author on the firm's blog, TMT Perspectives. Dana, first, what do you think of AT&T's sponsored data feature? I know, again, there's been a lot of criticism for it, but is it as bad as some say it is, or is it really nothing new, as I've seen some other people say about it?
The sponsored data plan is a little complicated and a little worrisome. Let me step back a couple steps and just be clear about what this proposal is by AT&T at this point. The proposal will affect wireless data customers. And the proposal essentially says we, AT&T, may enter into agreements with third parties that you do business with. So large companies such as Netflix or somebody else who has a data-heavy application of some kind. And when we do that, you are free to click on a button that says use sponsored data now. And therefore, when you do that, you will not, any data that is used will not be attributed to your data plan. And there are some features of this plan that are attractive. There are some features that are unattractive. And there's a lot that's really not understood yet, I think, by anybody, probably including AT&T. The good part of this plan is that there is a suggestion that AT&T will let others pay for your use of data. And there's something very attractive about that. And to some people, it's much more attractive than others. The bad part about this is that this is the first official step taken by AT&T that follows from its conclusion that your experience on the internet will in the future be dependent upon two things. One, the relationship you have with AT&T, and B, the relationship that AT&T has with third parties, and that relationship you may or may not be privy to, you may understand, you may not understand. And so the question right now, is that good or bad for consumers? The answer really is we don't know. I would say, though, there are a lot who have been very critical of this. And I would say in response to that, something that I think is simple but important, which is that in capitalist society, the role of experimentation is really critical. It is very, very important. And so the fact that AT&T is experimenting with a payment structure or a set of relationships here should not itself be troublesome. Indeed, we want our carriers to be more experimental today than they were yesterday. The problem with vigorous experimentation in the wireless market in the United States is very simple. We don't really have a competitive marketplace in the United States. We have 2 or 3 competitors that fundamentally compete with themselves to some extent, and really in large parts of the country, it is AT&T and Verizon competing with one another. That's not a very competitive marketplace. In fact, it's a marketplace that generally, in my estimation, players will follow each other on. And they can follow each other to a virtuous place, or they can follow each other to a bad place. So we don't have a deeply competitive marketplace right now. AT&T tried to buy T-Mobile a year ago or so with the intention of making that marketplace even less competitive. That was not an accident by them. They have concluded that their interests are best served with a marketplace that is not deeply competitive. So in a marketplace that is not competitive, experimentation can quickly lead to something that is very good or something that is very bad. But what it does not lead to is the kind of competition that you think of when you walk into the Apple store. In the Apple store, you go look at a product and you either say, I like it or I don't. You buy it, you turn away, you have 100 other competitors that you could go to. If AT&T begins a series of policies that is not attractive for consumers, that is a very difficult thing to undo. So experimentation is good, but experimentation in a marketplace that is not competitive can quickly lead to something pretty onerous.
I see. Speaking of something potentially bad and potentially very onerous, let's talk about the regulatory body that could potentially step in to stop something like that. Do you see the FCC getting involved with AT&T sponsored data plan? Is it something that they could potentially step in to quickly quash?
I don't think quickly at all, but I do think that there is a new FCC chairman, Tom Wheeler. He is a Midwesterner who has substantial Washington experience, having led the Cable Association back in the 80s when the cable industry was very fragmented, and having led the wireless industry back in the early 90s when the wireless industry was very fragmented. So this is a fellow who is new. He's very experienced. He's in his mid-60s, meaning that he is not too worried about his next job. He is a fellow who has said in the two speeches he has made to date that he is willing to look very carefully at what is going on in the markets. He is not interested in interrupting a experimentation that seems virtuous, but he is willing to look hard at what that experimentation results in. And if it appears that it is resulting in a marketplace that is less vigorous or for which that is being exploited, he seems to be suggesting that as the leader of that agency, he will look at and possibly intervene in the market where it's appropriate. So he's made some very vigorous speeches so far saying he believes in the open internet, but he also believes that the internet will not be open without some amount of oversight by the FCC.
I see. It's going to be interesting to watch. There's a lot of negativity surrounding the unveiling of this feature, but it's going to be interesting to see if ultimately it's something that does shape consumers' decisions.
With regard to these very complicated issues, I think sometimes it's valuable to ask a 14-year-old what they think. So today in the car, I asked my 14-year-old what he thought about this plan. He was aware of the sponsored data plan. And what he said was, he said a couple things. He said, well, free is good. So that part of it he likes. But that to him, it looked like this was a slippery slope whereby big companies were going to determine what he could or could not do on the internet. And that worried him. I'm not saying he's right, but I think the marketplace is always trying to understand what consumers think. And 14-year-olds care a great deal about their wireless data. So I thought it was an interesting point of reference.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a good point. Well, once again, that was attorney Dana Fricks of Chadbourne and Park. For more of his insight, be sure to visit tmtperspectives.com. It is an excellent blog in this area. And, of course, for more of these video interviews, along with curated commentary from the Lex Blog Network, the world's largest legal blog network, be sure to visit us at lxbn.com. Thank you for joining me today, Dana.
Terrific. Thank you for having me.